I'm Cassidy Morgan, and at 32, I had spent my entire life trying to earn my parents' respect on my own dime. I worked through college, paid off debt, and built a stable career while my sister Skylar bounced between failed passion projects, fully funded by mom and dad. Then one Tuesday, I did something I'd never done before. I bought a lottery ticket. I won $2.5 million. At our next family dinner, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd finally see me. Instead, they saw a new ATM. By the end of the week, they broke into my apartment and tried to burn what they thought was my winning check. That's when I realized it was never about love. It was always about control. And this time, I was done playing along. Before I share the full story, let me know where you're watching from. And hit like and subscribe if you've ever been the one holding your family together, until they made you choose between peace and self-respect. You're not alone. Growing up in our middle-class suburban home in Orlando, Florida, wasn't exactly the picture-perfect childhood you'd see in those cheesy family sitcoms. From the moment my sister Skylar was born, I was 6 at the time, it became painfully obvious who the favorite child was. And while most parents at least try to hide their preferences, mine never really bothered with such pretenses. It was a constant, undeniable imbalance. It was in the air we breathed, the unspoken rule of our household. I remember when Skylar wanted ballet lessons, they magically found the money. She just had to have the best tutus, the most expensive point shoes. Meanwhile, when I desperately needed a graphing calculator for my advanced math class, a class I was actually excelling in, I was told to figure it out. So I worked extra shifts at the local grocery store, bagging groceries and stocking shelves, just to afford it. Skylar's artwork, even her messy finger paintings, were prominently displayed throughout our house, framed like masterpieces in the living room and hallways. My academic achievements? They were met with casual nods and a dismissive, "That's nice, Cassidy, but did you see what Skylar made today?" It stung every single time. It was a constant reminder that my efforts, my successes, were always secondary to Skylar's whimsical creations. Don't get me wrong, my parents weren't monsters. They provided the basics, a roof over my head, food on the table, and occasionally, they'd show a flicker of genuine interest in my life. But that flicker was always overshadowed by the glaring spotlight on Skylar. As we grew older, the pattern just continued. Skylar, bless her heart, dropped out of college not once, not twice, but after her third major. Each time, my parents supported her financially, enabling her through 5 different career changes. One year it was graphic design, the next interior decorating. Then she tried to be a yoga instructor, and finally her magnum opus, an online boutique selling overpriced bohemian clothing. Through all of it, my parents footed the bill, pouring money into her latest passion project. And me? I worked. I worked through college, maintaining a scholarship because I knew I couldn't rely on them. I juggled classes and multiple part-time jobs. And still, despite all that effort, I graduated with substantial student loan debt. The weight of that debt was like a physical burden, a constant companion that reminded me of the different paths we were forced to take. By the time I reached my 30s, I'd managed to build a decent life for myself. I had a steady job as a marketing coordinator for a tech company. Nothing glamorous, but it was stable. I had a small but comfortable 1-bedroom apartment, and just enough savings to occasionally treat myself to dinner out or a weekend trip. I wasn't wealthy by any means. Those student loans still consumed a significant portion of my monthly budget. But I was proud of my independence, proud of what I had built entirely on my own. It felt like a quiet victory, even if no one else celebrated it. That Tuesday started like any other. I was on my way home from work, mentally calculating how much I could afford to put in the tank until payday. Every dollar was accounted for, every expense meticulously tracked. While paying for gas, I impulsively added a lottery ticket to my purchase. I rarely played, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, usually when the jackpot made national headlines. But something compelled me that day. You know that feeling? Just a little whisper. You never know, right? The cashier, a sweet older lady, handed me the ticket with a smile. Lightning has to strike somewhere, I remember replying with a laugh, tucking the ticket into my wallet without much thought. It was just $1, a fleeting moment of what if. That evening, I heated up some leftover pasta and scrolled through social media, half watching some bland reality TV show. Then the lottery drawing came on, and I remembered my ticket. I pulled it out, fully expecting the usual disappointment of maybe matching one number if I was lucky, or more likely, 0. The first number was called. It matched. My brow furrowed. Coincidence. The second number. It matched too. I sat up straighter, a strange flutter beginning in my chest. By the third match, my heart started to race. This wasn't normal. Fourth number matched. Fifth match. When the final number was called and it matched, I literally stopped breathing. My world went silent. I checked and rechecked the numbers, convinced I was misreading something, that my eyes were playing tricks on me. But there it was, all 6 numbers. According to the announcer, the jackpot was $2.5 million. I just sat there, in stunned silence, for nearly 30 minutes, staring alternately at the ticket and the television, the world around me fading into a distant hum. Eventually, my hands shaking so much I almost dropped my phone, I managed to take a blurry photo of the ticket. Then, I placed it carefully in a Ziploc bag and tucked it into my worn copy of Pride and Prejudice on my bookshelf, the safest place I could think of at that moment. My hands were still trembling as I called my best friend Chloe. "You need to come over now," I managed to say, my voice small, barely a whisper. And I'm not joking or exaggerating. Chloe arrived 20 minutes later, clearly worried. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" Wordlessly, I showed her the ticket, the numbers I'd scrawled down from the broadcast. She gasped. "Holy crap," she whispered, her eyes widening. "Cassidy, holy crap, is it real?" I asked, my voice still small, laced with a desperate hope. "Can you check the numbers again? I'm afraid I'm hallucinating." She pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen, and looked up the winning numbers. She compared them to my ticket, her gaze sweeping back and forth. Then she looked up at me, her face breaking into a wide, disbelieving grin. "It's real! Oh my God, it's real! You just won $2.5 million. That night was a blur of disbelief, elation, and a strange underlying fear. Chloe stayed over, and we talked until sunrise about possibilities, about what this could mean for my life. For the first time, I could pay off my student loans entirely. I could buy a house, not just any house, but a beautiful home with a yard, something I'd only ever dreamed of. I could invest, travel, donate to causes I cared about. The weight of years of financial anxiety seemed to lift, replaced by a dizzying sense of potential. The next morning, I called in sick to work. My supervisor sounded surprised, but I vaguely mentioned a personal emergency. Chloe drove me to the State Lottery Commission headquarters. I was far too nervous to get behind the wheel. At the lottery office, officials verified my ticket and identity. They walked me through the process, calmly explaining my options. A lump sum payment, which would be less after taxes but immediately available, or annuity payments spread over several years. They also arranged for a ceremonial big check photo opportunity. They explained the actual funds would be processed through their financial department and would take approximately 2 weeks to hit my account. As I posed for photos, holding that oversized novelty check, the reality finally started to sink in. My life had changed forever, in an instant, but I had no idea how profoundly it would test my relationships and reveal truths about my family that I had always suspected but never wanted to confirm. The kind of truths that, once seen, can never be unseen. With the initial verification complete and the ceremonial photos taken, I returned home with a folder full of paperwork, a copy of that novelty check for my records, and a head spinning with possibilities. The lottery officials had strongly advised keeping my windfall private until the funds were secured and proper financial and security measures were in place. Winners often find themselves besieged by long-lost relatives, investment opportunities, and charity cases, the lottery representative had warned. Consider carefully who you tell and when. I knew she was right. Every logical fiber of my being screamed, keep it quiet. But I also felt a strange obligation to tell my family. Despite our complicated relationship, they were still my parents. And despite the blatant favoritism, Skylar was still my sister. Part of me, a part I'm not proud of, a part that was still desperate for their approval, also wanted them to see that I had finally, in this unexpected way, Succeeded. Maybe now they would finally see me. After a few days of deliberation, wrestling with the pros and cons, I decided to share my news during Sunday dinner at my parents' house. A monthly tradition I maintained more out of duty than enjoyment. It was a familiar setting, and perhaps, I foolishly hoped, a safe one. I arrived early that Sunday, trying to act normal, helping my mother, Eleanor, prepare the meal. She was chopping vegetables, her movements precise and practiced. "You seem different today, Cassidy," she observed, eyeing me with a slight frown. "Did something happen at work?" "You could say something happened," I replied, unable to suppress a small smile that kept trying to break through. "But let's wait until everyone's here." My father, Arthur, joined us a few minutes later, asking about my apartment's persistent plumbing issues, problems I would soon be able to leave behind forever. I tried to feign interest, but my mind was a whirlwind of anticipation and anxiety. When we finally sat down to eat, a nervous energy pulsed through me. I took a deep breath. "I have some news," I began, my heart pounding a frantic drum against my ribs. "Something pretty incredible happened last week. I won the lottery." My parents stared at me in disbelief. "The lottery?" my father repeated, his voice incredulous. "Like $20? "No," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "The state lottery. I matched all 6 numbers. It's $2.5 million. The silence that followed was profound. You could have heard a pin drop. Then, both my parents erupted in exclamations of shock and congratulations. My mother actually got up to hug me, something that rarely happened in our family. "Oh my goodness, Cassidy, this is unbelievable," she exclaimed, her eyes wide with what seemed like genuine delight. For a fleeting second, I thought, this is it. They finally see me. Then she added, "Wait until Skylar hears this." And there it was. Not even a full minute of pure, unadulterated celebration before my sister was mentioned. As if on cue, the front door opened and Skylar swept in, fashionably late as usual, a designer bag slung over her shoulder. "Sorry I'm late, traffic was awful, what did I miss?" My mother practically tripped over herself rushing to deliver the news, a triumphant look on her face. "Skylar, Cassidy won the lottery, $2.5 million. Skylar's expression shifted rapidly, like a kaleidoscope, from surprise to excitement to something much more calculating. She hugged me with an unusual, almost aggressive enthusiasm. "That's amazing, Cass. We're going to have so much fun with this." I felt a knot forming in my stomach at her immediate use of "we." Before I could even respond, my father chimed in, seizing the moment. "This is perfect timing, actually, Skylar. Tell your sister about your situation." Skylar, for once, at least had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. "It's not a big deal, really. I'm just in a bit of a financial bind with the business." The business was her latest venture, the Bohemian Dream Boutique, an online store selling overpriced, vaguely bohemian clothing that she'd started 6 months ago after abandoning her last job at a marketing firm. I'd already heard from my parents that it wasn't going well. "It's more than a bit of a bind," my father corrected her, his voice firm. "The credit card debt alone is nearly $30,000, and then there's the inventory loan." "Dad, please," Skylar interrupted, shooting him an annoyed look before turning back to me with a practiced saccharine smile. "But hey, that's not important right now. This is about your amazing news, Cass. Though, I mean, if you were thinking about helping family, I wouldn't say no." I sat there, my food long forgotten, as I processed what was happening. Not a single question about how I felt about winning. No inquiries about my plans or dreams. Just an immediate, seamless pivot to how my windfall could solve Skylar's problems. It was like a well-rehearsed play, and I was just the unfortunate prop. "I haven't even received the money yet," I said carefully, trying to keep my voice even. "There's a whole process, and I need to speak with financial advisors about the best way to—" My mother cut me off, her voice already taking on a familiar, dismissive edge. "Oh, don't be silly, Cassidy. Family helps family. And with so much money, you can easily spare enough to clear Skylar's debts and give her business a proper chance." The knot in my stomach tightened, twisting into a hard, cold ball. "I haven't made any decisions yet," I insisted. "This just happened, and I'm still processing everything." "What's there to process?" my father asked, his tone shifting from celebratory to something harder, more demanding. "Your sister needs help, and now you can provide it. That's what family does. The sheer audacity of it left me momentarily speechless. But then, a lifetime of suppressed resentment bubbled to the surface. "What about my student loans?" I countered, my voice rising slightly. "Or the fact that I've been living paycheck to paycheck while trying to build some kind of security for myself. Don't I deserve to take care of my needs first?" "Don't be selfish, Cassidy," my mother said, her voice taking on that disappointed, guilt-tripping tone I knew all too well. "Your sister has a real business with real potential. This could be her big break." "And what about my big break?" I asked, the words tumbling out, raw and unfiltered. For once in my life, something amazing has happened to me, and immediately it becomes about Skylar. Skylar's expression, however, turned instantly hurt. She put on a masterful performance of injured innocence. "I can't believe you're being like this, Cass. If I won, I would share with you without hesitation." The hypocrisy of that statement was almost laughable, and a bitter laugh bubbled up in my throat. I swallowed it back. Just 3 years ago, when Skylar had received a $10,000 inheritance from our grandmother, she'd spent every single penny of it on a luxury vacation to Bali. Not so much as a coffee, let alone dinner, was offered to any of us. The rest of the meal devolved into tense, uncomfortable conversation, with my parents alternating between aggressive guilt trips and thinly veiled demands. By the time I left, the pure, exhilarating joy of my windfall had been thoroughly tarnished. Instead of celebrating with my family, I drove home, fighting back tears of frustration and profound disappointment. Once home, I poured myself a generous glass of wine and immediately called Chloe. "That bad, huh?" she asked after I recounted the dinner disaster, her voice soft with sympathy. "They didn't even wait 5 minutes before making it about Skylar," I said, my voice breaking. "Not a single question about what this means for me or what I might want to do with my own money." "I'm not surprised," Chloe replied gently, "but I'm still so sorry, Cass. What are you going to do?" I took a deep breath, the wine starting to calm the frantic beating of my heart. "Exactly what I planned before dinner. Pay off my debts, secure my future, and make smart decisions. And apparently," I added, a new resolve hardening my voice, "set some very firm boundaries with my family." Little did I know just how severely those boundaries would be tested in the coming days. The morning after that disastrous family dinner, my phone began ringing at 7:30 a.m. It was my mother, Eleanor. "Cassidy, I've been thinking about our conversation last night," she began, without preamble. "I think you were just overwhelmed, which is understandable. But now that you've had time to sleep on it, I'm sure you see how important it is to help your sister." I pinched the bridge of my nose, already feeling a headache forming behind my eyes. "Mom, it's not even 8 and I'm getting ready for work. Can we talk about this later?" "What's there to talk about?" she insisted, her voice gaining that familiar edge of righteous indignation. "This is what family does, Cassidy. Your father and I have always taught you girls to support each other." The irony of the statement was not lost on me. It was so thick, I could almost taste it. "I need to go," I said, trying to keep my voice polite but firm. "We'll discuss this another time." Before she could respond, I ended the call and silenced my phone. I desperately needed space to think clearly, without the constant barrage of pressure and manipulation. At work, I met with my supervisor and vaguely mentioned that I might need to take some personal time in the coming weeks to deal with a family situation. I wasn't ready to disclose my win to my workplace, especially since the funds hadn't even been transferred yet. It felt safer, more controlled, to keep it quiet for now. During my lunch break, I checked my phone to find 3 missed calls from my mother, 2 from my father, and a text from Skylar. "Hey sis, just wanted to say I totally understand you needing time to process everything. No pressure, but when you're ready to talk, I have some spreadsheets showing exactly how much I need to clear my debts and get the business profitable. Love you." I closed the message without responding. It was the usual mix of faux understanding and blatant demand. That afternoon, I contacted a financial advisor recommended by the Lottery Commission, someone experienced in working with sudden wealth situations. We scheduled an appointment for the following day. That evening, the calls continued. My father's voicemail was particularly pointed. "Cassidy, your mother is very upset by your behavior. We raised you better than this. Call us back immediately so we can discuss how you're going to help your sister. I'm extremely disappointed in you." I didn't return the calls. Instead, I researched financial planning for lottery winners online and made notes of questions to ask during my appointment. I was digging in my heels. The next morning, my financial advisor, a calm and collected man named Mr. Sterling, walked me through the realities of my winnings. After taxes, the lump sum would be closer to $1.4 million, he explained. Still life-changing, but certainly not the full $2.5 million advertised. He went on to outline priorities. The first priority should always be establishing a robust emergency fund and paying off any high-interest debts, he advised. Then we can discuss diversified investments for long-term growth and security. When I mentioned my family's expectations, his expression turned grim. He gave a sympathetic nod. Unfortunately, this is very common with lottery winners. I always advise my clients to establish clear boundaries early. Any gifts to family should be very carefully considered and formally documented to avoid ongoing expectations and, frankly, exploitation. I left his office with a preliminary financial plan and a stronger resolve to protect my newfound security. But my family wasn't making it easy. They were relentless. That evening, I received a group text from my mother, including both my father and Skylar. We're all getting together tomorrow evening at 7 to discuss the family financial plan now that Cassidy has come into this blessing. Cassidy, please bring whatever paperwork you have so far so we can understand the timeline. I stared at the message in utter disbelief. The sheer audacity of scheduling a family financial plan meeting without even consulting me. The actual winner was staggering. My blood ran cold. I replied simply, I won't be attending. My financial decisions are my own to make. The response was immediate and heated. My father called, and when I didn't answer, he left another blistering voicemail. Your behavior is completely unacceptable, Cassidy. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? By turning your back on your own sister when she needs help? I'm extremely disappointed in you. You need to show up tomorrow evening, or else. The barrage continued through the next day. Skylar tried a different approach, sending a long, emotional text about how her business was her dream, and how with just a small portion of my winnings, she could make it successful and pay me back someday. It was a desperate plea, wrapped in a thinly veiled promise she had no intention of keeping. But I didn't engage. I was done with their games. Instead, I returned to the Lottery Commission to finalize my decision to take the lump sum payment. I participated in the official big check ceremony for their press materials, holding the oversized novelty check while cameras flashed. The lottery officials again reminded me that the actual funds would be processed and transferred electronically within 2 weeks. After the ceremony, I stopped by a secure post office box I had rented specifically for this purpose and carefully deposited the ceremonial check along with copies of all my lottery documentation. The originals were stored in a safe deposit box at my bank. I was taking no chances with these important papers. I had a creeping sense of unease, a premonition that my family wouldn't give up easily. And I was right. When I arrived home that evening, the sight of their car parked outside my apartment building sent a jolt of ice through my veins. My stomach dropped. Eleanor, Arthur, and Skylar were sitting there, waiting. My father, Arthur, rolled down the window, his expression grim. We need to talk, he said firmly. Since you wouldn't come to us, we've come to you. I glanced around the parking lot, acutely aware that this was not a conversation I wanted to have in public. My small apartment was bad enough, but at least it was private. Fine, I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. But I have nothing new to say. Once inside my small apartment, the tension was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. My mother immediately began examining the space with thinly veiled disapproval, her eyes scanning every corner as if cataloging my humble existence. My father positioned himself commandingly in the center of the living room, hands on his hips, a stern expression on his face. Skylar perched on the edge of my couch, looking uncomfortable but determined, like a child forced to deliver bad news. This has gone on long enough, my father began, his voice resonating with authority. You've had time to process your good fortune, and now it's time to discuss how this will benefit the family. Specifically, how much she'll be giving to Skylar to clear her debts and properly fund her business, my mother added, interjecting smoothly. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my rising anger in check. I've thought about this a lot, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. And I've decided that I need to secure my own future first. I have student loans to pay off, retirement to plan for, and… Student loans? My father interrupted incredulously, scoffing. You're going to be a millionaire, Cassidy. Who cares about student loans? I do, I replied firmly, my voice gaining strength. I've worked hard to stay afloat with those payments for years. And the money isn't as much as you think after taxes. But still plenty to help your sister, my mother insisted, her tone sharper now. Skylar leaned forward, her voice a practiced whine. Cass, I only need about $80,000 to clear everything and have a proper marketing budget. That's nothing compared to what you're getting. $80,000 is not nothing, I countered, my voice laced with the weariness of years of the same conversation. And what happens when that runs out? Will you need another infusion of cash in 6 months? A year? That won't happen, Skylar insisted, though her eyes slid away from mine, unable to hold my gaze. This is different. I just need a proper chance. Like the proper chance you had with graphic design. I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. Or interior decorating, or becoming a yoga instructor. Each time, Mom and Dad had supported her financially, pouring money into her latest whim. And each time, she had abandoned it when it got difficult. That's enough, my father said sharply, his face reddening. Your sister is trying to build something of her own. All she needs is adequate capital, which you now have in abundance. This is about family responsibility, Cassidy. Where was this family responsibility when I was working 2 jobs to pay for college? I asked. Years of resentment finally spilling over, hot and raw. Where was it when I needed help with the down payment for a car so I could get to work? You've always had different standards for Skylar and me. Always. That's not true, my mother protested weakly, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. It is true, and we all know it, I said, my voice trembling slightly with the force of my emotions. For once in my life, something good has happened to me, and I deserve to enjoy it without guilt or manipulation. The argument continued for over an hour, growing increasingly heated. My parents cycled through guilt trips, outright anger, and even attempts at negotiation. What about $40,000 instead? Skylar alternated between playing the victim and making veiled accusations about my character. Finally, emotionally exhausted, drained to my very core, I asked them to leave. I've made my decision, I stated, my voice firm, unwavering. I won't be bullied or manipulated into changing my mind. My father's face hardened, a cold, hard mask. If this is your attitude, Cassidy, then don't expect to remain part of this family. The words hit me like a physical blow, a punch to the gut. But this time, I stood my ground. If your acceptance is conditional on me giving away my financial security, I replied, meeting his gaze directly, then maybe that's for the best. After they left, the silence in my apartment was deafening. I collapsed onto my couch, emotionally drained but oddly, profoundly relieved. I had finally stood up for myself after decades of accepting second-place status in my own family. But I knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. I called Chloe and asked if I could stay at her place for a few days. I need some space from my family, and I honestly don't trust them not to show up again. Of course, Cass, she said immediately, without hesitation. Pack a bag and come over. Wine will be waiting. As I packed enough clothes for a few days, a cold dread settled in. I had no idea how prophetic my distrust would prove to be. I spent 3 relatively peaceful days at Chloe's apartment. I went to work as usual, but returned to her place rather than my own. My family continued their campaign of calls and texts, sometimes apologetic, sometimes accusatory. But I responded minimally, usually with simple variations of, my decision is final. I needed to project unwavering resolve. On the 4th day, I realized I needed to retrieve some work documents I'd left at my apartment. Chloe offered to go with me, but she had an important meeting she couldn't miss. I'll be fine, I assured her, trying to sound more confident than I felt. I'll grab what I need and be out in 10 minutes. I chose my lunch break, thinking my family would be at work or otherwise occupied. As I approached my apartment door, everything seemed normal. The hallway was quiet, no familiar cars in the parking lot. I unlocked it and stepped inside. Immediately, I sensed something was wrong. A faint smell, something vaguely acrid, hung in the air. And then, voices, coming from my living room. I froze, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. My parents' voices. They were in my apartment. For a moment, I considered backing out quietly and calling the police. The thought flashed through my mind like a warning light. But anger, a righteous, burning anger, overrode caution. This was my home, my sanctuary, and they had violated it. I strode into the living room, my jaw tight, my hands clenched into fists. "What are you doing in my apartment?" I demanded, my voice cutting through the air like a knife. My mother, Eleanor, and father, Arthur, were standing by my coffee table. Between them and a small metal trash can I recognized from my own kitchen, flames were rising from what looked like paper. With a jolt of horrifying realization, my blood ran cold. I knew exactly what was happening. My mother was burning what appeared to be my lottery check. My father turned to me, his expression cold, hard, and utterly determined. "If you won't share, you won't get a penny." I rushed forward, but it was too late. The damage was already done. The paper was mostly ash now, crumbling into black flakes, flames consuming what little remained. My mother stepped back, a look of grim satisfaction on her face, as if she'd just performed a necessary surgery. "Now we can discuss a fair arrangement," she said, her voice chillingly calm, "since you'll need to reapply for the prize." I stared at them in utter shock, my mind racing, trying to process what had just happened. How had they gotten in? What exactly had they burned? And most importantly, did they really, truly think this would work? "How did you get into my apartment?" I managed to ask, my voice surprisingly steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. My father replied, matter-of-factly, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "We still had the spare key you gave us last year when you had the flu. You never asked for it back." The violation of my space, the calculated nature of their actions, it was almost too much to comprehend. And yet, as the initial shock began to fade, replaced by a surge of pure incredulity, something unexpected happened. I started to laugh. It began as a small, choked chuckle, and quickly grew into full-blown, almost hysterical laughter. My parents exchanged confused glances, their smug faces twisting into expressions of bewildered alarm. Clearly, they were entirely unprepared for this reaction. "What's so funny?" my mother demanded, her voice sharp with annoyance. "Do you think this is a joke?" I struggled to compose myself, wiping tears of sheer disbelief from my eyes. Actually, I managed to gasp between laughs. "Yes, this is hilarious." "You've lost your mind," my father said, his confidence wavering slightly, a hint of unease creeping into his voice. "No," I replied, finally finding clarity, my laughter subsiding, but a wide, almost manic smile remaining on my face. "I finally found clarity. Do you really think that's the actual lottery check?" Now it was their turn to look confused, their faces mirroring my earlier bewilderment. My mother glanced at the smoldering remains in the trash can, then back at me. "What do you mean? We saw the photos online from the lottery commission. You holding the check?" I shook my head, feeling a strange, profound calm settle over me. "That oversized check is a prop for photos," I explained, enunciating each word clearly. "It's not the actual payment method. No lottery commission hands out real checks for millions of dollars like that." Their expressions began to shift rapidly, from confusion to dawning uncertainty, then to outright horror. The color drained from my mother's face. My father, always quick to bluster when challenged, shook his head vehemently. "You're lying. You're just saying that because we destroyed it." In response, I pulled out my phone and opened my email, turning the screen toward them to show a message from the Lottery Commission confirming my electronic funds transfer was being processed. "The money will be deposited directly into an account I've set up specifically for this purpose," I said calmly, deliberately. There was never a real check to burn. The silence that followed was deafening. My parents stood frozen, rigid, the grotesque reality of their failed manipulation sinking in, hitting them with the force of a tidal wave. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice small, trembling, and suddenly, sickeningly conciliatory. "Cassidy, we were just trying to break into my apartment and destroy what you thought was my financial security," I finished for her, my voice hard. "Yes, Eleanor, I can see that." "You're blowing this out of proportion," my father attempted, his authoritative tone returning. But it lacked its usual conviction. "We're your parents. We were just trying to bring you to your senses by committing breaking and entering and attempted destruction of property. I shook my head in disbelief. Do you have any idea how unhinged that sounds? Just then, the front door opened, and Skylar walked in, carrying a takeout bag. She stopped short when she saw me, her eyes widening, the bag almost slipping from her grasp. "Oh, you're here." She looked nervously between me and our parents, her gaze flitting like a trapped bird. "I was just bringing lunch for Mom and Dad while they talked to you. While they trespassed my apartment and tried to destroy what they thought was my lottery check," I corrected. Watching her eyes widen further. "I didn't know they were going to do that," she protested quickly, her voice a little too high, a little too defensive. Whether she was telling the truth or not didn't really matter anymore. The fact that any of them thought it was acceptable to enter my home without permission spoke volumes. It cemented everything I had suspected about their complete lack of respect for me, my autonomy, my very being. "All of you need to leave now." My voice was steady, calm, but there was no mistaking the finality in it. "Cassidy, please," my mother began, her tone shifting to pleading, tears welling in her eyes. "We made a mistake. We were just so worried about the family being torn apart over money." "No," I countered, the word sharp, definitive. "You were worried about losing access to money you believe you're entitled to. There's a difference. After everything we've done for you," my father started, his voice a gravelly rumble. "That's exactly the problem," I interrupted, cutting him off. "You've convinced yourselves you've done so much for me, when the reality is, I've been largely on my own since I was a teenager. You're not entitled to my lottery winnings, and your actions today have shown me exactly who you are. All of you." I moved to the door and held it open, my arm outstretched, a clear invitation for them to exit. "Leave now, or I call the police and report a breaking and entering. Your choice." They gathered their things in stunned, humiliated silence. As Skylar passed me at the door, she paused, her eyes narrow with indignation. "This isn't fair, Cass. You're being cruel." "No, Skylar," I replied quietly, my voice surprisingly gentle given the circumstances. "Cruel is expecting someone to sacrifice their financial security for your series of failed ventures. Cruel is supporting parents who would break into your sister's apartment to destroy her property. You've always been the favorite, and you've used that to your advantage your entire life. That ends today." The look on her face was a mix of shock and dawning comprehension. After they left, the apartment felt empty, yet strangely liberated. I immediately called a locksmith to change my locks and began researching security systems I could install. I also called Chloe to update her on what had happened. "They did what?" she exclaimed, her voice vibrating with outrage. "That's insane. Are you okay?" "Strangely, yes," I replied, surveying my apartment, noting the lingering scent of smoke. "I think this needed to happen. The illusion is gone now. I see them clearly for who they are. And it's actually liberating." It was a strange kind of freedom, born from betrayal. That night, I received a flurry of texts from extended family members, aunts, uncles, cousins, all expressing concern about the family rift and urging me to reconsider my harsh stance against my parents and sister. Clearly, my immediate family had been busy spinning their version of events, casting me as the villain. I didn't bother responding. Instead, I focused on finishing my packing. I had already given notice at my apartment and found a short-term rental in a secure building across town. No one in my family knew the address, and I intended to keep it that way. As I sealed the last box, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The money hadn't even hit my account yet, but I was already experiencing a different kind of wealth, the richness of clarity and the luxurious freedom of finally prioritizing myself. The day after the burning incident, I took a personal day from work to handle several important matters. First, I met with a lawyer recommended by Mr. Sterling, a sharp woman named Ms. Davis, to discuss the legality of my family's actions and how to protect myself going forward. "Breaking and entering is a criminal offense, Cassidy," Ms. Davis explained, her voice calm but firm, "as is destruction of property. Even if what they destroyed was ultimately just a souvenir, their intent was malicious." "I don't necessarily want to press charges," I said, still conflicted despite everything. "I just want them to leave me alone." "A restraining order might be appropriate then," she suggested, tapping her pen against a legal pad. and I'd strongly recommend documenting everything in case their behavior escalates further. Every text, every call, every attempted visit. Next, I visited the bank where I'd set up the dedicated account for my lottery winnings. The bank manager, a meticulous woman named Brenda, assured me that all security measures were in place, including requiring in-person identification for any transactions. "We've worked with lottery winners before, Cassidy," she explained, a knowing look in her eye. "Your account has our highest security protocols. No one can access it without your physical presence and multiple forms of ID. As a final precaution, I contacted the Lottery Commission to alert them to my family's behavior. Unfortunately, this happens more often than you'd think," the representative said sympathetically. "Rest assured, we will not discuss your winnings with anyone but you, regardless of their claimed relationship. Your privacy is paramount." With these safeguards firmly in place, I returned to my newly secured apartment to finish packing for my move the following day. It felt like I was fortifying myself for a siege. As I sorted through my belongings, deciding what to take and what to donate, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Hello," I answered cautiously, bracing myself for another lecture. "Cassidy, it's Aunt Vivian, my mother's sister." Aunt Vivian had always been somewhat of a neutral party in our family dynamics, neither actively encouraging my parents' favoritism nor actively opposing it. She was usually a quiet observer. "Aunt Vivian," I responded, my tone guarded. "I assume you've heard some version of recent events." "I've heard your mother's version," she confirmed, her voice wry. "But I've known your mother my entire life, so I can read between the lines. What really happened, sweetie?" Something in her voice, a genuine concern, devoid of judgment, prompted me to tell her everything, from the lottery win to the breaking and entering to the ceremonial check burning. I recounted every detail, the entire absurd, painful saga. When I finished, she was silent for a moment, the line buzzing faintly. "They broke into your apartment and burned what they thought was your check?" she finally asked, her voice a mixture of horror and disbelief. "Yes," I confirmed, and they seemed to genuinely believe that would somehow force me to share the money with Skylar. "Good Lord," she muttered, a low growl. "I knew your mother could be dramatic, but this is criminal behavior." "The irony is there was never an actual check to burn," I explained, a dry laugh escaping me. "The lottery doesn't work that way. The giant check from the ceremony is just for publicity photos. The real payment is processed electronically." Aunt Vivian gave a short, incredulous laugh. "So they committed a crime for absolutely nothing." "Essentially, yes," I said. And despite everything, I found myself smiling at the sheer absurdity of it all. You should have seen the look on their faces when I explained that to them. "Oh, I can imagine," she said, a genuine laugh in her voice now. "Listen, Cassidy, I'm so sorry this happened to you, and I'm sorry that your win has been tainted by all this ugliness. You deserve to enjoy your good fortune without this drama. Truly." Her understanding was unexpected and deeply touching. "Thank you, Aunt Vivian. That means a lot." "For what it's worth," she added, "your mother has been calling everyone in the family trying to rally support for her side. But after hearing what really happened, I think you'll find most of us are appalled by their behavior. You're not alone in seeing their actions for what they were." After we hung up, I felt a small measure of relief, knowing that at least some of my extended family understood the reality of the situation. It was a tiny crack of light in the dark wall of estrangement. The next day, as professional movers loaded my belongings into their truck, my phone began ringing repeatedly. It was my parents. After the 5th call in 10 minutes, I finally answered, my patience exhausted. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice flat. "Cassidy, we need to talk," my father said, his tone notably less commanding than usual, almost tentative. "Your mother and I have been discussing things, and we realize we may have overreacted." "Overreacted?" I repeated incredulously, a mirthless laugh escaping me. "You broke into my apartment and tried to destroy what you thought was my financial security. That's not overreacting. That's criminal." "We were upset," my mother chimed in, from what must have been speakerphone, her voice tinged with self-pity. "We weren't thinking clearly, but we're your parents, Cassidy. Surely we can move past this misunderstanding." "This wasn't a misunderstanding," I corrected her, my voice unwavering. "A misunderstanding is when we miscommunicate about dinner plans. What you did was deliberate and calculated." "But the point is," my father interjected, "we want to apologize and start fresh." Family is more important than money. I agree completely, I replied, my gaze sweeping over the movers carrying out my last boxes. Which is why I was so shocked that you were willing to destroy our relationship over money that isn't even yours. There was an uncomfortable silence on their end before my mother spoke again, her voice pleading. Skylar is very upset, Cassidy. She feels like you're punishing her for our actions. I sighed. I'm not punishing anyone, I said firmly. I'm protecting myself from people who have demonstrated they don't have my best interests at heart. So what now? My father asked, a hint of desperation in his voice. You're just going to cut us off completely? For now, yes, I said. I need time and space. I've arranged for my mail to be forwarded. And I'm moving today. Please don't try to contact me for a while. I'll reach out if I'm ready. You can't just disappear, my mother protested, her voice rising. We're your family. Family doesn't break into each other's homes and destroy their property, I reminded her. I have to go now. As I ended the call, a text came through from Skylar. I know you're angry, but you're being unfair. I had nothing to do with what Mom and Dad did. Call me when you stop being so selfish. The lack of self-awareness was staggering. The words were a fresh wound, but also a stark reminder of why I was doing this. I blocked her number without responding. The silence that followed was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. That afternoon, as I was settling into my new apartment, a modern one-bedroom in a secure building with a 24-hour doorman in a completely different part of town, I received an email notification from my bank. The lottery funds had been deposited. It was official. I was now a millionaire. I sat on my new couch, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, and allowed myself a moment to truly feel the significance of this change in my life. Despite all the family drama, despite the betrayal and hurt, this was still an incredible blessing. My phone buzzed with a text from Chloe. All settled in? How's the new place? It's perfect, I replied. And the money just hit my account. Champagne time, she responded immediately. I'll be there in 30 minutes. We're celebrating properly this time. As I awaited Chloe's arrival, I reflected on how differently everything might have unfolded if my family had simply been happy for me. If they had respected my autonomy and my right to make my own financial decisions. If their love had truly been unconditional. But their actions had revealed important truths. Painful ones, yes, but necessary to acknowledge. And perhaps that clarity was its own kind of fortune. When Chloe arrived with champagne and takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant, we toasted. Not just to my financial windfall, but to new beginnings and true friendship. To boundaries, Chloe said, raising her glass, her eyes sparkling. And to seeing people clearly, I added, clinking my glass against hers. As we ate and talked about my plans for the future, a profound sense of peace settled over me. The money would change my life in many ways, but the most valuable change had already occurred. I had finally recognized my own worth and stood firm in protecting it. The weeks following my move were filled with a strange mix of exhilaration and adjustment. With Mr. Sterling's guidance, I systematically addressed my financial priorities. First came my student loans, nearly $68,000 worth of debt that had shadowed me since graduation. Submitting that final payment brought an unexpected emotional release. I actually cried as I clicked the Pay Off Remaining Balance button. It felt like shedding a decades-old skin. Next, I established a robust emergency fund and set up diverse investment accounts designed for long-term growth. I purchased a modest but beautiful 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood with excellent security features. Nothing extravagant or flashy, just a solid, comfortable home that I owned outright, with no mortgage hanging over my head. You're being remarkably sensible, Cassidy, Mr. Sterling commented during one of our meetings, a slight smile playing on his lips. Most clients in your position immediately buy luxury cars or take lavish vacations. I've waited too long for financial security to risk it now, I explained, though I did book a 2-week trip to New Zealand for next month. I'm not completely boring, I added with a smile. At work, I gave my notice, explaining to my surprised supervisor that I had come into an unexpected inheritance, a small lie that seemed safer than announcing a lottery win. I agreed to stay on for 6 weeks to properly train my replacement and transition my projects. Through it all, I maintained my distance from my immediate family. They continued their attempts to contact me, sometimes apologetic, sometimes accusatory, but I held firm to my boundaries, like a newly formed steel wall. I did, however, cautiously reconnect with a few extended family members who had reached out with genuine concern, particularly Aunt Vivian. She became a steady source of information, a neutral party who could give me updates without judgment. Aunt Vivian and I began meeting for coffee every other week. During one such meeting, she updated me on the family situation. "Your parents are telling everyone they're giving you space," she said, with a knowing look, sipping her latte. "But the reality is, they're beside themselves that they can't find your new address." "Have they shown any real remorse?" I asked. Though I already knew the answer, she shook her head. "They're convinced they were justified in trying to help you see reason. Your mother actually said they did it because they love you too much to let you make such a selfish mistake." I sighed, the familiar weariness washing over me. "And Skylar?" Well, that's interesting," Aunt Vivian said, leaning forward conspiratorially. "Her business has officially folded, apparently. She took out some high-interest loans that she can't repay." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and was surprised to find I genuinely meant it. Despite everything, I didn't want my sister to suffer. "Don't be too sorry," Aunt Vivian replied, her voice firm. "Your parents refinanced their house to bail her out again." "They what?" I was genuinely shocked. My parents were in their early 60s and had been planning to retire in the next few years. "That's their retirement security," I exclaimed. "I know," Aunt Vivian said grimly. I tried to talk them out of it, but they insisted Skylar had no other options. She couldn't possibly get a regular job. "She could get a job like everyone else," I pointed out, exasperated. "That's what I said. But you know how they are with her. Always the exceptional child who deserves exceptional support." The conversation left me troubled. While I had maintained my boundaries, I didn't wish financial hardship on my parents. I decided to consult with Mr. Sterling about potentially setting up a small retirement fund for them. Not now, but perhaps in the future, when emotions had settled and they had hopefully gained some perspective. Meanwhile, I was discovering the profound joy of financial freedom coupled with purpose. With Mr. Sterling's help, I established a modest foundation focused on providing financial literacy education to young adults. I partnered with local community colleges to offer workshops on budgeting, understanding credit, and basic investing principles. All the knowledge I had struggled to acquire on my own. These workshops were a way for me to give back, to break the cycle of financial ignorance that had plagued my own family. I also made anonymous donations to causes I deeply cared about: a shelter for domestic violence survivors, the public library that had been my sanctuary growing up, and a scholarship fund for first-generation college students. These acts of giving brought me more satisfaction, a deeper sense of fulfillment, than any luxury purchase could have. I wasn't just changing my own life, I was creating ripple effects that might change others' lives too. Chloe remained my steadfast supporter through all of these transitions. When I confessed my nagging guilt about not helping Skylar, despite having the means to do so, she provided a valuable perspective. "Your sister doesn't need a bailout, Cass," Chloe pointed out, her voice firm but kind. "She needs to learn consequences. If you step in now, you're just replacing your parents as her safety net. Nothing will change for her." "I know you're right," I sighed, "but I still feel this nagging guilt." "That's because you're a good person," Chloe said firmly. "But being a good person doesn't mean being a doormat. You can be generous without being exploited. You've done more than enough. It's time for her to stand on her own 2 feet." About 3 months after the burning incident, I received an unexpected email from Skylar. Unlike her previous messages, the demanding, manipulative ones, this one seemed different, more reflective. "Cass," it began, "I've been doing a lot of thinking about everything that happened. I realize now how entitled I must have seemed about your lottery win. The truth is, I was desperate. My business was failing, and I was too proud to admit it. That doesn't excuse my behavior or Mom and Dad's, but I wanted you to know that I understand better now why you reacted the way you did. I miss my sister." I read the email several times, trying to gauge its sincerity. Was this a genuine moment of growth for Skylar, or another manipulation tactic now that her financial situation had deteriorated completely? After careful consideration, weighing Chloe's words and my own desire for authentic connection, I replied with a brief but not unkind message. Thank you for your email, Skylar. I appreciate your reflection on what happened. I'm still processing everything and need more time before considering any kind of reconciliation. I hope you're finding your way forward. Her response came quickly. I understand. For what it's worth, I've finally taken a regular job, assistant manager at Riverside Cafe. It's not glamorous, but it's stable. Take all the time you need. I'll be here if you're ready. This small evidence of Skylar taking responsibility for her own financial situation, getting a stable job, acknowledging her desperation, expressing genuine remorse, was the first positive sign I'd seen in years. While I wasn't ready to fully reconnect, it left me open to the possibility that genuine change might be possible, eventually. As my new life took shape, I found myself experiencing a profound sense of peace. My days were filled with meaningful work through my foundation, enjoyable hobbies I'd never had time for before, and genuine connections with friends and the extended family members who respected my boundaries. The wealth hadn't changed who I was at my core. I still shopped sales and felt a twinge of guilt when splurging on expensive items, but it had removed the constant background anxiety about money that had been my companion for so long. More importantly, it had catalyzed a necessary transformation in how I viewed myself and my relationships. One evening, as Chloe and I enjoyed dinner on my new patio, she raised her glass in a toast. To the unexpected silver lining, she said, her eyes twinkling. Without the lottery, you might never have seen your family so clearly, or found the strength to prioritize yourself. I clinked my glass against hers, reflecting on the profound truth of her words. Sometimes the greatest gift isn't the money itself, I replied, but what it reveals about the people around you and about yourself. 1 year after that lottery win that changed everything, I stood in the doorway of my home office, surveying the space I'd created for myself. Large windows overlooked a garden that was just beginning to bloom with vibrant spring flowers. The walls were lined with bookshelves, containing volumes I'd always wanted to read but never had time for. My desk, a beautiful antique I'd carefully restored myself, held a laptop and a neat stack of documents related to my foundation's latest financial literacy program. This room, like my new life, was entirely of my own making. Every element reflected my choices, my values, my vision, not those imposed by family expectations or financial limitations. It was a physical manifestation of the internal journey I'd undertaken over the past year. The path to healing hadn't been straightforward. There were days when I questioned my decisions, when the weight of family estrangement felt heavier than the relief of boundaries. There were nights when I dreamed about reconciliation scenarios, waking with a confused mixture of longing and resolve. My therapist, another investment in myself I'd made after the lottery, had helped me navigate these complex emotions. Healing isn't linear, she often reminded me, her voice gentle but firm. And establishing healthy boundaries with family doesn't mean you've stopped loving them. It means you've started loving yourself. That perspective had been crucial as I cautiously began reconnecting with certain family members. Aunt Vivian remained a steady, supportive presence, providing updates about my parents and Skylar without pressure or judgment. Through her, I learned that my parents had finally paid off the refinanced mortgage, albeit after my father postponed his retirement and took on consulting work. It was a tough lesson for them, but a necessary one. Skylar, meanwhile, had maintained her job at the cafe and even received a promotion to manager. According to Aunt Vivian, she had also joined a financial management group and was slowly, painstakingly working to repair her credit. These positive developments had eventually led me to accept an invitation to meet Skylar for coffee, about 8 months after our initial estrangement began. We chose a neutral location, a quiet cafe halfway between our respective homes. The initial awkwardness had been palpable as we settled at a corner table, each of us careful with our words, testing the waters. "You look good, Cass," Skylar had said, studying me, a genuine softness in her eyes. "Happy?" "I am," I confirmed, meeting her gaze. "And you?" "Aunt Vivian mentioned you're doing well at the cafe." A flash of the old Skylar appeared, a slight grimace at the mention of her service industry job, but it quickly passed. "It's been a learning experience," she admitted, her shoulders slumping slightly. "Definitely not what I envisioned for myself, but I'm good at it, surprisingly." We talked carefully around the edges of the past at first, focusing on present circumstances and neutral topics like new restaurants or local events. But eventually, we had to address the elephant in the room. "I'm sorry, Cass," Skylar said suddenly, interrupting a safe conversation about a new bookstore that had opened downtown. Her voice was quiet, raw. Not just for what happened with Mom and Dad and the check, for everything, for always expecting to be bailed out, for never considering what you might need. The sincerity in her voice caught me off guard. It was a genuine apology, perhaps the first I'd ever truly heard from her. "Thank you," I said simply, giving her space to continue. "When your money didn't materialize to solve my problems, I had to face some hard truths," she continued, her gaze steady now, filled with a newfound maturity. "I've never had to deal with consequences before. Mom and Dad always fixed everything, and I let them because it was easier." "It's a pattern that started when we were kids," I acknowledged, my voice soft. "It wasn't entirely your fault." "But I participated in it," she countered, cutting me off, her self-awareness striking. "And I benefited from it at your expense. I see that now." That first meeting had ended with a tentative hug and a promise to try again in a few weeks. We'd had several more coffee dates since then, each one a little more comfortable than the last. We weren't best friends. Too much history, too many scars stood between us for that. But we were finding a new, more balanced way to be sisters. My parents, however, were a more complicated matter. While I'd exchanged a few brief emails with them, I wasn't ready for in-person contact. Their apologies still carried undertones of justification, suggesting they hadn't fully recognized the gravity of their actions or the deeply ingrained patterns that led to them. "You'll know when or if you're ready," my therapist had assured me, "and it's perfectly acceptable if that time never comes." That permission to prioritize my own well-being without guilt had been transformative. I'd spent so much of my life accommodating others' needs and expectations that establishing firm boundaries felt like learning a foreign language. But with practice, it was becoming more natural. The lottery money, while providing material security, had been merely the catalyst for this more profound personal growth. The true wealth I'd gained was in self-knowledge and self-respect. This perspective informed how I managed my financial windfall as well. Rather than defining myself by my bank account or allowing money to become my primary identity, I viewed it as a tool, one that could provide security, yes, but also one that could create positive impact. Through my foundation, I'd helped fund financial literacy programs that had reached over 500 young adults in the past year. The feedback from participants was often emotional. Many shared stories of being the first in their families to understand compound interest, investment basics, or the true cost of credit card debt. "You're not just teaching them about money," one community college partner had told me. "You're breaking generational patterns." That comment had resonated deeply with me. Breaking patterns. Wasn't that exactly what I'd done in my own life? As I moved from my office to the kitchen to prepare dinner, my phone buzzed with a text from Chloe. "Just confirmed reservations for New Zealand 2.0 next month. Pack your hiking boots." I smiled, thinking about our upcoming adventure, our second trip to New Zealand, this time to explore the southern island. Chloe had been my rock throughout this transformative year, celebrating my victories and providing perspective during moments of doubt. "Can't wait," I texted back, thinking, adding a stop in Australia this time? Her reply was immediate. "Yes, let's do it." The freedom to make such decisions, to travel, to explore, to expand my horizons, was something I never took for granted. Neither was the autonomy to choose how I spent my time. In addition to managing my foundation, I'd started taking classes in furniture restoration, a hobby I'd always been interested in but never had time to pursue. My dining room table was currently covered with the components of an antique radio cabinet I was lovingly bringing back to life. As I prepared a simple but delicious dinner of salmon and roasted vegetables, I reflected on how my relationship with money had evolved. The initial panic about making mistakes with my windfall had given way to confidence in my careful decisions. The fear that wealth might change me fundamentally had been replaced by the understanding that it had simply revealed and amplified who I already was. Most importantly, I'd learned that financial wealth, while providing comfort and opportunities, wasn't the most valuable currency in life. Trust, respect, authentic connection. These were the true treasures, and they couldn't be purchased at any price. After dinner, I settled on my porch swing with a glass of wine, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. A year ago, I couldn't have imagined the life I now lived. Not just because of the financial changes, but because of the profound emotional freedom I'd claimed. The lottery had given me $2.5 million, but my own choices had given me something far more precious: a life aligned with my values, relationships based on mutual respect, and the quiet confidence that came from knowing my own worth. For anyone watching this who might be struggling with family boundaries or finding their own voice, I hope my story encourages you. It's never too late to recognize your value and require others to respect it. The path isn't easy, but the peace waiting on the other side is worth every difficult step. If my journey has resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with loved ones? What helped you find the courage to stand firm? Share your experiences below, and know that your story matters too. Don't forget to subscribe if you'd like to hear more real-life stories like mine, and hit that like button if this resonated with you. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the greatest twist in your story is the moment you decide to become its author.